Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service and covering the capital for over 30 years.
And I'm still alive to talk about it. It's a lot of fun, and when you cover the capital, there's a lot internally that you have to navigate. And it's our guest here today is someone who has to navigate the city streets and make sure that the city of Albany is well tuned, you might say, from the inside. We have Chris Spencer, who's the director of the Planning and Development Department at the city of Albany. So welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Excellent.
So tell us what the overarching concept of planning and development.
Sure.
Then we can get into some specifics.
Great. Well, the planning department essentially handles all land development projects coming into the city. So we deal with larger projects, larger apartment buildings. We deal with smaller site development projects. We staff 3 of the boards and commissions. So we have the planning board, which reviews all of the development plans. They deal with site plans. They deal with a number of other projects. They deal with comprehensive plans, things like that. We have the Historic Resource Commission. They deal with all the properties that are in historic districts or are historically designated properties. And then we have the Zoning Board of Appeals, and they are the Board of Appeals. And so they deal with variances, whether it's a use variance,
They deal with the unhappy people.
And provide relief where necessary.
Yeah.
So we deal with that. And then we deal with a lot of grant projects, dealing with things down at Corning Preserve, the bike trail, and just any kind of projects that we can get funding for. So we have a lot of internal initiatives that we're responsible for.
It just seems to me that Albany is surely well developed. I mean, it's probably 98%. I mean, there's a few open lots. So what's planning? You say the parks, but I mean, like, people want to rezone, knock down a house and make a...
That's a good segue.
Sure.
Rezone Albany.
So Rezone Albany, we are in the process of updating the city's zoning. So that's the ordinance that really regulates how you can use your land, what you can do on your land, how things have to look, how much landscaping you have to have, and what the mechanism is for getting approval. So the city of Albany, I think, went about 240 years before it even had zoning after it was chartered. So in about 1920, the city got its first zoning, and then it went another 50 years before it was updated in the 60s, and now here we are another 50 years later. So what happens during that process is that things grow, things change, things get built up, and they don't always fit what the zoning says they should be doing. So that requires smaller projects, people who are doing a small addition to their house or just a small little deck, having to go to the zoning board instead of just being able to do those things.
Right.
And our zoning, the way it is right now, because it's so antiquated, makes it very difficult to do larger projects or to deal with buildings that were built for a different purpose. And the zoning doesn't allow you to use it for anything that would be advantageous.
So now from residential to commercial?
Residential,
that kind of idea.
Commercial, an old school building, an old factory, industrial, things like that. So they're difficult to use, and in a lot of cases they make really great adaptive uses.
I know that like in New York City, sometimes they take these old factories and make condos out of them.
Sure.
That's what would be something that you're talking about.
Yeah, and we have an entire section of Albany that we refer to as the warehouse district. And there are a lot of great warehouses in there.
Is that Broadway?
Broadway, North Pearl, in that area.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great properties there that have sort of outgrown their usefulness in terms of being a warehouse or a factory, because the modern warehouses are looking for more open floor plans where they don't have pillars, they don't have lower ceiling heights, things like that. But a lot of them are great historic buildings. So we're adjusted the zoning to make sure that there's opportunities there for reinvestment, for new types of uses in there, while still making sure that it's viable for all the businesses that are down there to continue to grow.
So, so now if you want to build a deck in your backyard, you don't have to go to the zoning board?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you've probably heard of the term grandfathering. Somebody says there's a new law passed, and they say, well, it's okay, I'm grandfathered under the old law. That's essentially what nonconformities are. So it means that at some point your house was platted or you have built a business or did something, and at that time, the rules were, allowed for that, and it was legal. And then the city at some point changed the rules. So you become a legal non-conforming. So in terms of the size of your property, what that means is that even though your house was already built and you bought it the way it is, and it was legal at the time it was built, now that the city at some point said, well, the lot sizes should be X number of square feet, and now you're under. So in order to expand, you have to go get a use variance or an area variance. So it adds an unnecessary layer, and it really adds unpredictability.
So we won't have to do that? You're going to make it
Well,
better?
we have about 21,000 properties that are non-conforming out of 30,000
Right.
by area. And I think we've got about 15,000 plus that will now be conforming. So it's clearing up a lot of those
But don't
by
they-
changing the rules.
So you're changing it so that they're conforming, or
Yeah,
you're
so
changing it so that they have to apply for the variance to?
We're changing it in a large part so it's conforming. So if we look at a block or an area of the city in the neighborhood, and we look at what the zoning says, and the zoning says, let's say, maybe each lot has to be 50 feet wide by 150 feet deep. And we do a survey of that, and we find out, well, 80% of the properties are really 30 feet wide and 80 feet deep. So we adjust the rules so that now those are legal. So they don't have to go through that mechanism just to do a small improvement to the property.
Because then people would probably accuse whomever about wanting to raise revenue for the city, finding
Sure.
this is a revenue raiser.
Yeah.
Because you have to, when you fill out a form and you file the form, there's a fee that goes with it.
Right.
So if you had everyone who had a smaller lot, force them to conform to the larger lot,
Sure.
you're causing problems from people's
additional
perception.
costs.
Yeah.
Additional
perceptions.
time
Yeah.
and perception, of course, too. But
Yeah.
we want people to be able to make investments in the city of Albany, to invest in their home, to stay in Albany, and to feel good about where they live. So we don't want that to be a burden just to do that.
Now, in conforming, it has to be, a house has to, look like the other houses, or it couldn't be out of character?
Well, a lot of
What do
times,
they call that?
yeah, it's sort of a contextual,
You know.
or making sure that you're sort of sensitive to the area around you. So when we're doing infill development, so if you have a lot that's vacant or a building burned down or something like that, we try to make sure that the rules are such that you're able to match what's already there. So you're not having to go get a variance just to build in a similar manner to what the neighbors on either side of you have.
Well, here's my point. When I live on Hackett, across from St. Peter's parking garage.
Right.
And they had these...
Good neighbor, at least they're quiet.
Right.
Well, and they have these, one garage has these ugly teal blue squares on there, and the other one, they wanted to match that other ugly garage and build a second ugly garage.
Yeah.
And I said, wait a minute, you don't have to. We got an apartment complex on Weiss Road that's brick. We got a lot of other brick houses. I know that the contractor could put up brick on one side
Sure.
to make it look like it's part of the neighborhood. And I pointed to the Madison Avenue garage
Right.
as the example. So finally, this is why you have one side of the garage as brick and the other three sides, the ugly teal blue squares.
Right. Yeah.
Because I brought that up, and
Sure.
they didn't want any problems from the neighbors, I guess, and whatever, so they made the change. I want them to make the change on the older garage,
Sure.
but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, that's a good outcome, and that's something we've taken a look at, even in terms of parking garages, how parking garages are designed,
Yeah.
how they respond to the street, how they, deal with sort of the context of the neighborhood.
Now, the other side is that I grew up in Brooklyn in a neighborhood called Mill Basin, and we had these relatively small homes that they were built in the 1959, 58, and $30,000, and
Sure.
it was kind of quaint and whatever. Now people are buying two houses. They're tearing them both down. They're like $1 million homes
Right.
that they're buying just for the property, and they're building these McMansions, which are 3 stories tall. These other houses are 2, so that the shadow, depending on how the sun
Right.
rises, the shadow's over. And you have it next to one of these original homes from the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the newer homes, but not everyone's going to build a newer home.
Right.
Would that be allowed in Albany
Well,
here?
we have
If I
some-
wanted to tear down my house and build one of these McMansions, I mean, would that get approved?
Well, you would get approved in terms of how you're dealing with the zoning. So your setbacks are going to have to be either contextual, or you're going to have to meet what the district says. So if your properties on either side of you are 10 feet from the property line, we don't want to see your new building be 100 feet back. If the property's, we look at 2.5 stories, right? So it's kind of a typical limit for residential construction, 2.5-story buildings. Some of them may be short, some are a little bit taller. If you look up and down Madison Avenue, those are pretty tall, 2.5 stories. So we tried to make sure that we didn't put an artificial limit on, what the number of feet was, how high it had to be. It was really just being about within context. So I think in a lot of cases, building something that large and completely out of context would be difficult through the new zoning.
Oh, it would be
So,
difficult.
yeah, so we try to be a little bit
There
more
you go,
sensitive.
Mark, over here.
So
Because
I don't know that you're going to get your mega mansion right away.
McMansion.
In all, McMansion, sorry, yes. Going even higher.
It's sort of like a small mansion,
Right,
as
yeah.
opposed to a mega mansion, which is a huge,
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
Albany's been building up a lot. I mean, of course, those blocks in front of the Albany Med Center, I mean, they're knocking down houses, and, I mean, it looks nicer
Right.
instead of a
Well,
rundown
You're
neighborhood.
talking about the Tudor homes?
No.
you're talking about the area around Albany Med where they've done
Yeah,
apartments.
there's just
things like
all
that.
around, they're
Oh, you-
knocking everything down and
Yep.
either making residential, so. I mean, I just think that there's a lot of going on. I know next door, of course, to the Stiebel where we pray, which is 463 New Scotland Avenue, they knocked down a house, took away our play lot that I played with the kids, and they made next to the fire station. Are you familiar with that neighborhood?
Yeah.
And that's the Bach Library.
Right,
I mean, things are being done, that's all I'm saying.
yeah.
It's just not like the Albany's being stagnant now, but this is like a whole new overview of the whole city. That's,
Sure, and it's not, we don't look at it from a standpoint of we don't want change. We want change, and that's really what makes a city like Albany interesting, because things evolve over time, they change over time. Not every building is sort of just frozen in time. They have different uses and things like that. And then you have certain areas like around Albany Med where you have such an infrastructure and a need for more housing, and you want to get people who can live nearby and walk to work, so we can cut down on the traffic and things like that within those areas. So we look at sort of a slightly different land use pattern. In that area, that was all part of the Park South Urban Renewal Plan, which sort of looked forward a little bit in terms of, what should be built there, and went a little bit beyond what our underlying zoning said you could do there.
Oh, really? They
yeah.
did?
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the plan. I mean, it
Okay.
was passed by the council, and that was
Yeah.
sort of a separate document that dealt with development there in a different way than the rest of the zoning.
It's interesting because it looks cavernous now when you drive down New Scotland
Yeah.
there. And I like it because it makes
more
me feel
urban,
like
yeah.
Manhattan,
Right.
It makes me feel like, wow, this is really something. But a lot of people are recoiling and
Really? They don't
they're
like
not.
it?
But as long as there's so much more traffic that now the streets are going to be taking a beating.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, that the city responsibility to repave the streets?
Well, I mean,
or-
a lot of times with the development, when they're doing development work and they're tearing up for all the utilities, there's sort of a shared responsibility. So the developer is paying some of it.
Right.
National Grid, when they tear up certain streets, they're responsible for replacement, and, the
Water
water department does some of that. So we try to make sure that everybody's coordinating, so at the end of
Okay.
the day, we've got a unified pavement scheme, and it's not just patchwork.
Let's hope, right?
Yeah.
Going back to the Bach Library, I mean, some of my neighbors there were offended by how modern the building looked compared to the old style, and they said it didn't fit in with the character, and I'm like, man, let's move on. I mean, let's get some more modern
Yeah,
looking buildings around here. I mean,
There's nothing wrong with it. It's, that's what makes it interesting.
And they have the geothermal component to that
Yeah.
building for heating. I think that's
Sure.
wonderful.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's talk about this rezone Albany and what your sort of what your problems have been, what your challenges, whatever you want
Sure.
to call it. I mean, and how you're overcoming that, because there's 90,000 residents, and there's you go from one end of the city and by cross gates all the way down to the river. I mean, that's huge. And you got to talk to all these neighborhood associations, and you got to repeat the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love you stick to it in this. I've been through several of your presentations.
Oh, thanks.
And I just marvel at how even-tempered and how calm you are. And
Most of the times, it is a challenge, and it's a challenge because it's a city that has grown up over many, many years with and without zoning rules
Yeah.
and things that dictated, how things could be built. So when you try to apply new rules, and try to get it correct, it's difficult because you're dealing with so many things that don't fit into a neat little box.
Well, it used to be, Mayor Corning said I could do this.
Right, and that's the way things were done. Things were done by variance. So rather than fix the
That
zoning,
was the zoning. That
you
was
go
Mayor-
ask for permission.
Mayor Corning, it's
Yeah.
better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission.
Yeah, exactly. So that happened a lot. But with that, that's a difficult thing for a developer to come into the city, and
Right.
they want to know what the rules are, and they want to know what it is the city wants, and they want to know how long it's going to take them. It's all of their investment decisions are based on some form of predictability.
Yeah, is the city opening up to different developers? Because I used to work at BBL Construction, and there would been a whole big thing about how, the city is really leaning more towards two developers to
Yeah.
do the whole city, but now other people just shied away from coming into this, other companies shied away from coming into the city. I know when I called up someone to survey my property, they said, oh, we don't come into, that's Hirschberg and Hirschberg. They
Yeah.
got the whole city, they
Sure.
control the city. I mean, is any of that true, or is that
Well, I think
perception?
historically that may have been true. When we started this process, we asked a lot of developers to come in and give us their feedback. What's wrong with the city of Albany in terms of the land use, the development regulations, the zoning, all of those kinds of things. And we didn't get a lot of people that hadn't worked in Albany. And one of the answers we got, which was kind of revealing, was they felt it wasn't confusing at all. You just had to know who to ask. So that's the point where when you have 2 or 3 developers who know who to ask,
Yeah.
it's a lot different than having any developer be able to look online, see what our rules and regulations are, and know what's expected of them and what they can do.
And is that what's going to happen
And
moving
that's
forward?
exactly what's going to happen moving forward. So
Okay.
we've taken the comprehensive plan, which is really the roadmap for the city. That's the city's vision. That's the citizens' vision. That's our
Okay.
shared vision as a community. We've taken that, and one of the first steps in the comprehensive plan, the Albany 2030 plan, is to create zoning that is consistent with the comprehensive plan,
Okay.
update our zoning. So that's sort of one of our steps.
Oh, that's part of, the
And it's-
rezone Albany is part of the 2030 plan?
Sure, that's an
Oh,
outgrowth of that, really.
Oh, okay.
And any, in New York State law, it gives the cities the power to regulate through zoning. But in doing so, it's supposed to be consistent with your comprehensive plan.
And are you involved with the Complete Streets?
Yep.
Redesign, like what they did with Madison Avenue, and they're going to continue with Madison? And
Yeah, we get involved in that, and we've also, a
is that
couple
a
of years.
good, well, explain Complete Street.
Sure.
Bicycle, walking, and driving, and
Yeah.
explain that.
So the Complete Streets really looks at all modes of transportation. So it's transit, bicycles, walking, and automobiles. So it's really not trying to give preference to any of them, really trying to treat them all as equal as you can, but you have to look at the overall traffic, the amount of vehicles coming through, and then we have to look at how is the traffic moving right now, and are we going to impact it in a negative way by doing something like adding a bike lane? Is it going to maybe take some cars off the street? So we have to look at all of those different kinds of parameters when we do that. So in doing so, one of our goals is also safety. So
That's
we
good.
call
Thank
it
you.
traffic calming. So when you have, just as a point of reference, when you have a street that's designed for cars going 40, 45 miles an hour, when a pedestrian gets hit at that speed, the fatality rate is about 95%. When you can bring that speed down to 25 miles an hour, it's more in the 20 to 30%, which is still not good, but again, that's, creating all of
Let's
those
say-
safety things.
Yeah, but if you at 30 miles, let's not say 25, let's say 30.
Yeah. It's much lower than, it's kind of exponential once you
Yeah,
get above
okay.
30 in terms of
So
the
that's, but
fatality rate.
because I thought the idea was that if you had narrower lanes, people drive slower.
People will drive slower.
Psychologically, they.
Yep.
It
Yeah, because
just-
you're sort of sensory. You're
Yeah.
sensing things near you, parked cars, things like that. So you don't have as much room. You don't feel, you're feeling the speed more than you are when there's not another car right next to you. But the idea really is to make sure that traffic is moving efficiently
Well,
as
that's
well.
timing of the lights. I
Right.
mean, these lights are not timed at all very well.
Yeah.
And, that's someone else's department in traffic safety and this police department.
Right. So if you look at Madison Avenue, for instance, there was 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, plus parking lanes on either side. But invariably what would happen is you're behind somebody in the left lane, and then all of a sudden they stop to make a left-hand turn, and there's no lane. So now you're stuck behind them. Traffic starts piling up behind you, or you try to go to the right. So with the new configuration, now there's always that left-hand turning lane. It's a lane that you can also merge into from a side street or from a driveway.
Yeah.
So that keeps traffic moving a little bit better. So you're slowing the traffic down, but you're keeping it from stopping all the time.
Well, it's tough in Albany for people to go right.
Yeah.
Or lean left, right?
Yeah.
But, big plan, I don't know if this construction, but the Greyhound station plus that whole area down there,
Yeah.
it's just
the
such a
Greyhound.
valuable piece of land, and it's just an open parking lot. The streets are a mess.
Right.
I don't know if,
Well, the
again,
state's been looking at that for quite a while.
It's
There's
state property?
a lot of them are controlled by the state. That was all area that was going to be set aside for the convention center originally.
And now they
And then
don't
that
need it.
moved. So now the state has put out an RFP at least once now to try to find a developer to deal with some of that. So that's going to be an ongoing conversation, working with the state, working with some of the other
Yeah, but it's
organizations
20
down
years
there.
already that it's been an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, well, it's.
Come on, let's close the conversation.
Well, I think that that's the thing that part of we're doing is dealing with the rezone, dealing with the things we can as a city. We don't always control the state properties, so it's
You can't really say, hey, let's make some condos.
no. But in any of those things, we want to be partners with the state on any kind of development and make sure that the city is getting the best
But
return on anything that happens there.
Economic development is not in your bailiwick, right?
No, we work very closely with Capitalize Albany, so it's sort of
Because I was wondering what your thoughts were about an aquarium or a zoo. We got the zoo, we got the
Sure.
Capitol, but we got but I thought, and I could say that.
Yeah, right. No.
I just want to make it clear. I'm the
In
one.
fact,
who
I
said it.
didn't even laugh. So
Okay.
just to be clear.
But an aquarium or some tourist attraction like that, or even doing a Fort Orange replica like the Williamsburg, Virginia, the replica.
Well, I think capitalizing on the city's history and heritage is always a smart move. You're going to bring people in, you preserve more of what people like about this city, and it sort of helps tell the story about Albany. The aquariums, I don't know enough about. I haven't done a lot of market research to say whether this is the right
Schenectady
region
has
for it.
one now.
Schenectady has
Rotterdam.
one, or Rotterdam at
It's
the
close enough. No,
at the old Rotterdam Square Mall.
Yeah.
So they have that. So now at this point you're competing with them, but there may be some other venue that makes sense, to draw more people in. Those are things that we keep. Part of what we were trying to do and Capitalize Albany has been trying to do is to get people living downtown.
Right, okay.
And that makes a big difference when you come out of a show and there's things going on downtown, and the people living down there then give restaurants a reason to stay open later.
Yeah, but
and things like that.
I'm still looking across from the Fort Orange post office and looking at that land that Rabbi Simon was talking about.
Where's the Fort Orange post office?
I forgot
The one
name
that's
of the
attached to
street.
the parking garage.
Yeah.
Really? All right.
It's all
And-
sort of integrated into that.
Yeah, and you got that open land over there, and you just look at that, and when you come over the South Mall Expressway, and that's like a gateway.
Yeah.
That land, and there's something. Even putting a tarp over it all, just just to hide it. There's something just to,
Yeah,
so
well,
it's not, doesn't look like blight when you.
Yeah,
first,
it's an area that has a lot of potential, and at this point we don't know what's going to happen there, and we're going to keep reaching out to the state and working with the state and trying to find ways to sort of bring people together and start to reimagine those kind of spaces and think about what could be there. And we don't have all the answers, and we don't control the properties.
All right. So the Office of Energy and Sustainability, is that something that you work with?
Yep,
Or they're under your bailiwick? Or?
they are. It's the mayor's office of sustainability, energy and sustainability, but they work through my office and out of my office. So we've been dealing with a lot of projects in terms of sustainability. Part of our rezone is really looking at the sustainability.
So
of
what's
new
your
development.
favorite form of alternative energy?
I don't really have one. I think it's the one that you see the least. So I like the geothermal. I like things like that. Solar, where it doesn't become a big visual impact, I tend to like. Wind turbines tend to need a lot of space and a lot of area around them, so probably not so good in an urban area. So there's but really good solid construction that looks at passive ways of dealing with energy instead of just
Yeah.
sealing up a building, and knowing how to circulate air and things like
Right.
that.
And I'd like to, recommend you find a solar farm. Maybe that's what that property could be used for.
Yeah.
A solar farm, because you can then take that energy from that property and move it throughout the city.
Sure.
And you imagine how much you could lower the cost.
Yeah, I don't know the particulars in terms of that scale, how much you would do, but there's a fair amount.
Talk to the folks at Suffolk County.
Yeah.
They've done it. And they have it even along the highway, Massachusetts. You go along the Mass Pike, they got these solar farms along the Mass Pike.
So we've just completed, one of the solar arrays that was just completed is on top of the Swinburne Park, the ice skating rink.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Not yet.
So the entire roof, and it's something you don't see from the ground, you'd only see it if you're up high, but it's utilizing that entire roof structure for solar, so, and the city will be getting money back from the company that put that in.
Okay, wonderful.
So we're working
That's
on
good
that.
news. That's good news. I just want to bring up, you had, before you came to the city of Albany, where were you? You were...
Just prior to this, I was at the University of Albany as a campus planner, so I was with a team of campus planners there and engineers and architects. And so we dealt with a lot of the growth that happens within the university, different projects that are coming in.
Do you like the way the new campus looks, or the uptown campus looks?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some interesting things coming on. There are, the more respectful you can be of the original design and the original architecture and ideas there, the better, more successful they'll be. But it's difficult. It's because it's a very sort of static plan, and it's hard. It's hard to add on to the podium. It's hard to add on to different parts of the campus, and I think it's a challenge for an architect to find something that's sort of new and unique, but still blends with the campus overall. So it's always a challenge.
The life sciences building they did a nice job with,
they've got some
with the
similarities.
roof and all that.
Right.
But it's interesting because they had University Hall.
Yep.
Were you involved with that?
No,
design?
that was before
Because
my time as well.
They had a president there, Kermit Hall,
Mm-hmm.
and he unfortunately passed away in a drowning accident. And I said, well, you don't have to name a building after him. You already had one named after him, University Hall.
Yeah.
And that's where the that's where the administrative office is. That's
Right.
where so that's why I was. But I guess
the new business school is a
the
very
joke
nice,
was too
nice
soon.
building,
I guess.
so.
Okay.
But it's a great campus, and really we've been working very collaborative.
Did it help
campus.
you in your job now, having that experience?
Sure. It gives you sort of an insight to how some of these larger institutions operate, the challenges that they have in dealing with things outside of their control. And so we've sort of worked very closely with them as part of our rezone. We did a whole quarter study with the university focused around their downtown campus.
You were a familiar face to them, so that
it was,
made it easier,
yeah,
I guess.
and it was great.
Okay.
I think the end results are going to be good, but it's really looking at, especially in their downtown campus and the alumni quad, how do we make that area connect better to the neighborhoods? How do we make sure all of the work that the university is doing also has some benefits to the surrounding community?
And redeveloping the old Albany High School.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge investment that the university is making that I think is going to really help that area.
I'm excited about that.
I am too. It's great.
that's terrific. Well, I'm glad, I want to, continued success. You've only been I think you started September of 2014,
yeah.
so,
Yeah.
about 3 years that you're in this position. So
Seems like just yesterday and many, many years ago. So at the same time, no, I love what I do. It's a great job, and it's always challenging, and no 2 days are the same. So
well, keep up the good work.
thank you.
All right,
Appreciate the time.
success with what you're doing.
Thank you very much.